Uganda's parliament has passed a bill which would criminalise people who identify as LGBTQ, with those found guilty facing up to 10 years in prison. Under the proposed legislation, friends, family and members of the community would have a duty to report individuals in same-sex relationships to the authorities. Homosexual acts are already illegal in the East African country, but the bill seeks to go further and criminalise people on the basis of their sexual identity. The bill passed with widespread support in Uganda's parliament.
In our country, we will have our morals. We will protect our children. And we are making this law. We are making this law for ourselves. We are making this law for our children. We are making this law for the children of our children. This country will stand firm. And once it passed, I can tell you, Madam Speaker, we are going to reinforce the law enforcement officers to make sure that homosexuals have no space in Uganda.
Hi guys, this is the Advisor and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to speak up how the United States and all the Western countries, the European countries, former exploiters of Africa are now jeopardizing the welfare of all the minority LGBTQ plus communities in Africa and making it look like as if it is the Africans that are doing it. Now, Uganda has recently passed laws that will imprison members of the LGBTQ plus community for up to 10 years and will impose death penalty on those who bugger anyone under the age of 18 or who transmits HIV to another male by that act. Yeah, the West has clearly gone crazy. And here are some responses. These are two spokesmen making official statements from the White House. The other is President Trudeau of Canada. And listen to them.
The bill is one of the most extreme anti-LGBTQI+ laws in the world. If the AHA is signed into law and enacted, it would impinge upon universal human rights, jeopardize progress in the fight against HIV/AIDS, deter tourism and invest in Uganda, and damage Uganda's international reputation.
Parliament passing it, it still has some process to go here. We're certainly watching this real closely, and we would have to take a look at whether or not there might be repercussions that we would have to take, perhaps in an economic way, should this law actually get passed and enacted. And that would be really unfortunate because so much of the economic assistance that we provide Uganda is health assistance, and largely through PEPFAR. You can see a world in which, a law like this, should it be enacted, would not only, as Karine rightly said, just be devastating to a whole community of people inside Uganda, but if it were to have any kind of an effect on our economic assistance, that would only make that worse. So we'll have to take a look.
I want to begin by taking a moment to condemn in the absolute strongest terms the despicable law put forward by the Ugandan government discriminating against the 2S LGBTQI+ community. This is something that Canada totally and completely stands against. We will be looking at how we can support the community in Uganda as we continue to stand for 2S LGBTQI+ rights in Canada and around the world. And we call upon all leaders, including all leaders around the world, but particularly Commonwealth leaders, to come out and clearly condemn this despicable piece of legislation.
Now, they are clearly threatening to punish Uganda by withholding financial assistance from this country for standing up for the values of their own society. Now, this is how far the European exploiters are prepared to go in bullying a sovereign nation into following the decadence that prevails in their own society. And let us not for one moment think that these Europeans are doing this out of the goodness of their hearts. First of all, they are not doing this out of humanism or altruism or love or for caring because they want to be caring or understanding. No. The reason why this movie is ticking them off is so badly is that it is foiling their plans of exploiting Africa through the back door, no pun intended, to use these minorities to control Africa and with resources to normalize the decadent activities that prevail in their countries. These countries have more pressing things to do than to care about the extremely insignificant number of people who are inclined to feel pleasure in dipping their organs in the place where doodle-doo comes from. You know? They have bigger problems. But you know, this is not just about Uganda. Several African countries have gone in this direction. Kenya, Tanzania, but Rwanda and Botswana are a few. Though they have not gone as far as Uganda, like imposing death penalties. The West has been trying to use the LGBTQ plus community to exploit and control third world countries, because they can no longer just walk in and rob and pillage and plunder as they have alike. They have resorted to a more subtle trick. Promote the LGBTQ plus communities in Africa to become strong enough financially and politically and to gain influence, so they in return can be used by the West to continue their control over Africa. But this heavy promotion has caused a backlash. It is having the opposite effect. Every law that has now been enacted by governments in Africa is because of, against gay people, is because of the meddling of Europe and the West. Now, this is the response from President Yoweri Museveni of Uganda. This man has testicles as big as that of a Nubian ram goat, and he doesn't mince his words. Yeah, man seed bag well long. This is what real man do. Listen to how he respond to a journalist who dare to question this man's position and what he does in his own country. And listen to the question and listen to his response. Real deal this.
What is your message to Western human rights groups, to President Obama, to lesbian, gay, bisexual and transgender people?
Respect African societies and their values. If you don't agree, you just keep quiet. Let's manage our society the way we see. If we are wrong, we shall find out by ourselves. Just the way we don't interfere with yours.
Do you personally dislike homosexuals?
Of course, they are disgusting. What sort of people are they? How can you go? I never knew what they were doing. That's how I've been told recently that what they do is terrible, disgusting. But I was ready to ignore that if there was proof that that's how he's born, abnormal. But now the proof is not there.
Because to begin with, African societies have never had a history of penalizing anyone who identified as gays. In fact, gays have lived normal lives among the general population from time immemorial. They were always safe. Initially, it was not outlawed because, for all intents and purposes, gay people did not actually exist, in the minds of Africans. They just didn't exist. They were there, but nobody would acknowledge their existence. They were just humans. That's it. And they were not provoked or troubled or penalized in any way. As long as they kept their activities to themselves, they were okay. And it worked fine for everyone. So why is the West funding these gay organizations and is taking it so hard when Africans start to push back? These LGBTQ plus people kept their gayism to themselves and among themselves in Africa. African societies abhor such acts and would never even acknowledge its existence. It would only be spoken of in hush-hush terms among individuals, but never in the open. It is somewhat like the don't ask, don't tell policy of former US President Bill Clinton. So, what has caused the African countries to go so far as to enact these laws against gays? The reason is that the United States, Britain and Canada, in collaboration with other Western countries, have formed an organization called Human Rights Africa. This organization is based where? Not in Africa. It is based in London. It is ostensibly a human rights watchdog group to protect the rights of minorities and control state excesses. But it says nothing about the many atrocities taking place in Africa against ordinary citizens by certain dictatorial governments. It says not much about that. Nothing about the mass exploitation of the natural resources that they dig, that they see one in London and their other white cohorts across the world are digging out of the ground in Africa daily. They say nothing about the environmental disasters that recurs day in, day out when they rob Africa of its oil and gases and of the impoverished people, poisoning themselves as they scrape up buckets of oil, raw crude oil to sell. The oil that is poisoning their rivers and streams and giving them unsafe drinking water that causes them to die at relatively young ages. And you know the fact is that Africa has always had its own human rights charter. It was enacted at an OAU conference in 1963 and it was ratified by all African countries at that time, and the African countries have always adhered to it. It is called pamphlet number 6. Minority Rights under African Charter on Human Rights and People's Rights. That's what it was called. Look up Human Rights Charter, OAU Human Rights Charter, pamphlet number 6, and you will see it come up. So Africa has always had in law the means and the ways and the idea to protect minority people like gays, and it has always been respected. So, what does that organization known as Human Rights Africa do? Their main activity is to fund gay rights organizations all over Africa. Nearly every country in Africa have at least one, and some African countries have as much as 3 separate organizations taking up for these gay rights, and each has several branches. Now, let us ask one important question. If the West has been exploiting Africa for over 550 years non-stop, why would anyone think that they now care about human rights in Africa? The same countries whose neck it has wedged its foot in permanently and continuously for 550 years. But smart people will say, clearly the reason for the so-called human rights shouts from the West is that they see this as a way of undermining Africa. Once you undermine the values of a society, that society becomes weak. Weak societies can be exploited. These minorities will be totally beholden to the West and can be easily controlled and be made to do the biddings of the West. The plan is to make Africa weak by eventually putting these gay people into power who will give the West their full support. Remember, the West cannot just barge in with guns and take what they like anymore. The world has changed. Also, even more importantly, the influence that the former slaves countries used to have over Africa no longer exists. Africa no longer has any respect for these exploiters in the West, and almost all African countries are now supporting the countries that never had slaves nor had exploited the African continent. And most significantly, among them are Russia and China, members of the BRICS community. And Africa is moving towards BRICS and away from Britain, Canada, United States, and all the other European countries that have been exploiting Africa. And for the purpose of this video, America and Canada are European countries, because that's where they come from, come kill out the people in North America and take over their country. So for this video, when I speak of Europeans, that includes America, United States people, government, and the Canadian people. You see, Africa no longer wants anything to do with the West. And the West knows this, which is why they are using the gay agenda to gain a foothold of new butt kissers, so they can use these Africans to keep them under their boots. Konoto. Africa is looking to China and Russia. On a little trick won't work. Africa just need uno out of its neck. And uno figure with uno little bit of charity money, it is about doing business with the BRICS nations like equals and with total dignity. Africa is not on a little footstool anymore. Uno need figure